Hi there, this is Grumpy Opinions. Let's get on with the show. Snowpiercer is a sci-fi show on Netflix all about a giant train moving through the snowy future, saving the last members of humanity from certain doom. Episode 206, Many Miles from Snowpiercer, is ironically an episode where the character Miles and Miles doesn't actually appear in it at all, despite the title. There you go. No, in fact, this is actually a shorter than usual episode that's all about Melanie, letting us know what she's been up to all this time. And things are in trouble from her right from the point when her skidoo gets stuck about half a mile from the base and she's got to lug her battery pack sled in by hand, past a whole bunch of dead bodies and mess, till she finally gets a little bit of power and heat up and running. And from there, things go from bad to worse because an inexplicable avalanche suddenly happens, wiping out all the kit she left behind. Meaning she basically only has one MRE pack that lasts her for the entire month she's stuck there. And what's worse, she started hallucinating that Wilfred's there and a few others chatting to her while she's trying to go about her business. But Melanie's sensible, so she soldiers on relentlessly. She rations her food and checks the beacons and starts reminiscing about how she got to the point through Wilfred's megalomania that she actually finally stole the train when he was still on the platform, despite Alex not being on board yet. But something weird ends up happening because her food starts to vanish. And then the food wrappers start moving around by themselves. Is somebody there? A real person? Turns out no, it's actually just a rat, so she devises a makeshift trap and then uses that rat to track down the whole nest, which is through a wall next to a natural hot spring. So with a bit of good rat to chomp down on and a little bit of free heat and power, she's a little bit more upbeat until a storm blows over the antenna mast that she's been using for the uplink, which explains how she managed to miss a connection last week. So she heads out and fixes it, and things actually seem to be going good until the day arrives that Snowpiercer is supposed to check in with her, and nothing happens, nothing on the radio for days, until finally she feels the vibration of a train coming, and she rushes out to meet it, only the train isn't slowing down, and just as it zooms past she sees Alex frantically banging and shouting to her from the big Alice engine room window because clearly something bad has gone down on Snowpiercer. So what did I think? Well, this was an interesting change of pace this week, and it was a good opportunity for Jennifer Connelly to stretch her acting legs and do a nice bit of work on the show. I mean, she's always been a good actress. I mean, as I've mentioned before, she is the only Oscar winner on the cast. But mostly, the scripts just had her with very little to do most of the time, or kind of naff stuff that she's had to work with script-wise. But what I really loved this week was that this is a classic sort of pioneer story. I mean, essentially this was the movie The Martian, the film where Matt Damon gets stuck on Mars all by himself and has to survive with no water by improvising and using science and potatoes. Well, there's that with a dash of Castaway tossed in there as well, and also a few obvious visual references to The Thing, like with the suicide lady frozen in the chair with blood icicles. I mean, that's straight from the movie The Thing, which is probably the most famous icy horror movie going. And then there was all the stuff with Melanie fixing things, improvising rat traps, and that was all great. And this appealed to me an awful lot because it reminds me of a computer game I really like. That's one called The Long Dark, where you play it being a Canadian pilot who crashes in the Rockies after some weird electrical storm wipes out every piece of electrical equipment in the world. So you basically need to wander around, keeping warm, salvaging stuff, and parts of this episode really felt like playing that game. I'd also thought that it did a really good job of ratcheting up the tension because every time Mel overcame one problem, something new would organically pop up. And then to top it all off, she rushes out to get the train and it just barrels straight past her and doesn't stop, doesn't even slow down. Now, I doubt that they're going to kill Melanie off, at least not like this, and it's not like she can't just traipse back and eat rat for a couple of days. I mean, there are solar cells powering the base. I mean, I think that's how that worked, and there's natural geyser, so I don't know, we'll see what happens, but yeah, it was really interesting to also see how the train started up from the inside perspective. Because obviously at the beginning of season 1, all we ever saw was Leighton's point of view of him breaking into the tail. Plus, it was nice that we actually got to see a little bit of Commander Grey, back for just a minute, and just a nice little cameo there, which was kind of fun. But on the other hand, I mean, despite this episode being fairly stripped back and basic, it had a few moments of kind of silly stuff, and possibly one of the things was the slightly convenient timing of the first kind of bad things happening. It was also a little bit silly, things like, her skidoo getting stuck that close. And maybe it's just me, but this is Mel we're talking about. I mean, nothing else in the episode made me think she would have dragged the sled all that way instead of just spending 5 minutes digging out the skidoo and using it to drive that last half mile in a quarter of the time. And then, of course, sudden unexpected avalanche wiping everything out. And then, after 7 years of the station being there, the antenna falls over just a few days after she arrives due to nothing that she did. And again, I don't hate it. It's just, it just feels a little bit coincidental. Also, she seems to be hallucinating fake people literally hours after arriving, so I mean, either there's an awful lot more wrong with her than just loneliness, but I actually suspect we'll just never have any of this show up in the show again, which is a shame, because I mean, the idea of her constantly seeing people who aren't there would be kind of cool as an ongoing character thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't actually have a huge amount of say to this, because I really liked that they played with the format this week and they gave us something different, not just beating the same drum over and over and over again. And as I've said before, this season is such an improvement on season 1. It's like a whole different new show, even though it's actually made by basically the same people. So yeah, long may it last, they seem to have found their stride. And I expect that in next week's episode we'll get a rundown on whatever it is that actually led to the train failing to respond to Mel and why it didn't stop to pick her up. And what's almost certainly that's going to be connected to the Breachman murders at the end of the previous episode. And maybe that's the lack of them that's stopping the train slowing down. I expect we'll know soon enough. But one thing I would like to mention, which I'll say in a couple of videos, is that there's a good chance content is going to slow down a bit over the next few weeks. I mean, due to a change in my work, I'm actually going to be really, really busy for a while, possibly right up until the middle of summer. So instead of promising anything specific in terms of videos, I'm going to do what I can to get videos out when I've got time, which will mostly be at the weekends. But it might mean a drop down to one review per week, just for a bit, as well as obviously the monthly ones when I can get them done. But just letting folks know. So till next time, these have been my grumpy opinions. And a special thanks to all my patrons, and most especially my top tier patrons Judith Coloma, Laurie Laporte, and Michelle Forbes. Thanks guys, everyone keep it real, keep safe, and take care of yourselves. Bye bye.